Today, I'm going to share with you how to study for the LSAT effectively and share my specific LSAT study routine with you guys. I'm going to break today's video into 4 parts. First off, how to create an effective schedule. Secondly, what makes a good drill. Third, how to take timed practice tests. And fourth, too often neglected, how to properly review. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz, and I increased my LSAT score from a 152 to a 175 on LSAT test day, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Creating an effective schedule is one of the most important things you can do, because if you're not studying the right things, you're not going to get the results. I'm going to share with you my laser approach to LSAT prep, which I use as the foundation for all of my LSAT study plans inside the LSAT Unplugged program. The idea here is that we build the foundation first before jumping into timed practice tests, but there are a lot of steps in between. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. And you want to adopt the LASER approach in your LSAT prep, because if you're taking practice tests without having built a strong foundation, you're just going to burn through valuable practice material and you're going to be disappointed in your results because you haven't yet learned what you're being tested on. So the first phase of LASER approach is learning, where you are building that foundation through getting a clear understanding of the different LSAT sections and the different LSAT question types. There are roughly 15 different types of logical reasoning questions. There are 4 major topic categories in LSAT reading comprehension. And so you want to get the lay of the land before you start taking timed practice tests, or else you're not going to know what it is that they're asking you about. Of course, you can learn that foundation through reading LSAT textbooks, which are roughly 500 pages, or if you want to, you can instead take an online course where you learn the basics in short, bite-sized videos like what we've created at LSAT Unplugged for you. The second phase is accuracy, A for accuracy, where you are drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each LSAT question, and I'll get more into drilling in just a minute. The third phase is S for sections, where you're doing timed sections to work on your pacing to determine how you're going to best allocate your time over the course of the section. With standard timing, meaning without extra time accommodations, you're going to have 35 minutes per section, and it goes by quickly. You don't want to run out of time and not get to all of the questions before the time runs out. You don't want to get bogged down or stuck on any particular questions. More on that later as well. The fourth phase of the LASER approach is the E for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests so that test day itself will feel like just another run through. You don't want your accuracy to drop in section 4 just because you're tired, because it's section 4. You want to maintain your stamina over the course of the entire exam, which can be quite taxing. Even with just 35 minutes per section, the LSAT ends up being almost 2.5 hours. If you have time and a half or double time, it becomes, of course, a lot longer. The final phase is the R for review, too often neglected. Of course, you want to make sure that you are learning from your mistakes. You are gaining the key insights from the questions that you get wrong, because every question that you answer incorrectly or have difficulty with is an opportunity to learn something new. I've created a framework around review called the Socratic review method. It's a cornerstone of my LSAT courses and my one-on-one coaching. You can check out the links below the video to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out, and I'll share more on review later in this video as well. Now, the reason I crafted the LASER approach to LSAT prep, where you're building that foundation before you're taking the exams and reviewing, is because this was not what I did back when I was studying for the LSAT. I fell into the trap that I see so many students fall into, where they take exam after exam after exam. They're measuring their results, they're happy or sad about those results, and then moving on to the next exam. It can be kind of addictive to see the results after each test. You chart them on a graph or something, you're obsessively tracking them, and you're wondering, did I do well? Did I do better? Or did I do worse? And I'm sad about it. That dopamine is kind of this endless vicious cycle where you're wasting limited material, and the material is a lot more limited than it used to be. There used to be nearly 100 released LSAT exams back when games was on the test. Now, without the games, LSAT reorganized everything, and now there are only 58 exams renumbered from 101 to 158. You're going to get through them faster than you might think. And of course, you're doing some as timed exams, but you're also using some of them for drilling, which brings me to the drilling phase of this video. Now, a lot of students drill LSAT questions by type, and I can understand why, because with 15 different types of logical reasoning questions, they naturally lend themselves to categorization. But the thing is that you're not always getting questions wrong because of the question stem type. You could be getting them wrong because you don't understand what the question stem is asking, meaning that you don't really understand what is the difference, for example, between a necessary assumption question or a sufficient assumption question, or is it that you didn't understand what the argument was actually saying? Or maybe your issue was with timing. So if your issue is with timing, meaning you're running out of time before you get to the end of the section, maybe you've got to pick up the pace. I recommend in logical reasoning getting through the first 10 questions faster because those are easier questions, giving you more time for the tougher questions later in the section. So maybe if you're aiming for 160 plus, I recommend do the first 10 questions in LR, logical reasoning, in roughly 10 to 12 minutes, build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. And with standard timing, you have 35 minutes per section. I like to have a little buffer at the end if possible, and so I recommend, what if you were to give yourself only 33 minutes per section, or even 30 minutes per section? Then 35 minutes seems like a lot. You have a safety buffer so that you can then go back and tackle the tougher questions that you may have flagged over the course of the section. For those who aren't aware, LSAT gives you a flagging function inside Law Hub that you'll also have the day of the test, and so you can skip and flag a couple of questions and come back to them later. I personally will flag 3 to 4 questions in a single section of 25 or so LR questions because I just don't want to deal with them in the moment. I trust that with my fast pacing, I'll be able to get back to them later in the section. So I think too many students are overemphasizing drilling by question type and not drilling enough of their pacing, or drilling perhaps methods of reasoning, because maybe you're not totally clear on correlation causation arguments or arguments that confuse necessary and sufficient conditions, and that's what you need to drill to better understand. So keep in mind that you might want to go beyond question stem type when you are drilling. Now, I also wanted to talk a lot about taking time to practice tests and share some strategies for you there as well. Of course, you want test day itself to feel routine, like just another run through, because of course adrenaline's going to be pumping. It's going to feel stressful because you're going to know it's the real thing. And so the more you can simulate that in advance, the calmer you will be on test day itself. And so I recommend taking at least 10 full-length timed practice tests before the big day, so that you have simulated every element, not just on the exam itself with the different features that you have in Law Hub, like the countdown clock and the flagging function and whatnot, and the highlighting and the underlining, but maybe you also should simulate prior to the test, what are you going to do for a warm-up? Maybe you want to do a couple of warm-up questions, like a favorite logical reasoning question or a favorite reading comp passage, or maybe you want to simulate when you eat your breakfast or your lunch, or whether you drink 1 cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee, whether you work out that morning or not. Whatever your ideal routine is, you want to simulate that so that your body and your mind are ready the day of the test itself. Maybe you want to do a quick meditation or yoga session before the exam starts to help calm you down. Whatever you got to do, work it out beforehand during your practice tests as much as possible. Now, I mentioned review earlier, the Socratic review method framework, which is a process that we guide students through at LSAT Unplugged to help you figure out which mistakes you're making and why, so that, of course, you can avoid making them again in the future. We guide you through not just the answer choices, but also the question stem and the stimulus to figure out exactly where your misunderstanding stemmed from. Was it in the argument? Was it in a tempting wrong answer or an unappealing right answer? You want to look at every single element, dissect the question, reverse engineer it, see it from the test maker's point of view, understand it inside out, so that when test day comes along, even if the surface level topic is different, the underlying logic of the question you thoroughly understand. Now, this process can be time consuming because it involves a lot more than just Googling a question, reading the explanation on some forum and saying, oh, I get it now, how could I have been so dumb, and moving on to the next. It really takes at least 10-15 minutes minimum to thoroughly review a question that you got wrong. And so this may mean that you're taking fewer practice tests so that you allow more time for review, but it's well worth it. And so maybe instead of doing 30 timed practice tests, you do 15 timed practice tests and review each one for double the period of time you would have otherwise done, but it's going to be well worth it when you extract that key insight so that you can avoid making the same mistake again. Now, of course, I wanted to leave you with a couple of key takeaways for your next steps, because I know that a lot of you are going to be nodding along when you hear about the laser approach, or the Socratic review method, and then you're just going to go back to drilling questions by type because it is addictive, or you're going to take more time practice tests because it is addictive. And so I want to encourage you to take a moment to think about, what are you really getting out of drilling LSAT questions by type? Because you're getting that instant feedback immediately after a single question. Every 2 to 3 minutes, you're discovering, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Which feels great, of course. But the thing is, these questions are divorced from their actual context in the full-length timed practice test. On test day, you're not going to get immediate feedback. You're going to have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get your score back. You're also not going to do question by question in a bite-sized individual context. You're going to be doing 25 or 26 logical reasoning questions in a single section in a 35-minute strictly timed window. And so doing them bite-sized here and there without any timing at all is not at all what test day is going to look like. And so, of course, it's not just about accuracy, which is phase 2 of the laser approach. It's also about phase 3 with S for sections, doing full individual timed sections to work on your pacing. It's about E for exams and endurance, and it's about R for review as well. You don't want to neglect the other stages of your LSAT prep journey. Now, on the flip side, those of you who are doing nothing but taking full-length timed practice tests, are you reviewing them in depth to understand what mistakes you're making and why? Are you extracting key insights about what you need to be working on outside of the timed practice test to figure out what are the gaps or the concepts you are missing so that you can correct those and then do that much better next time around? Or are you burning through valuable practice material? You can't just churn and burn the PTs. You don't want to cram this. The best LSAT prep takes place over a longer period of time, if possible, and you want to be consistent in your prep where you have a routine. You take a test, you review it, you drill your weak areas on the side, or you review some foundational concepts. Then, and only then, do you take more practice tests. You also want to make sure that your practice tests are strictly timed in realistic testing conditions, meaning you're not pausing the clock to go to the bathroom, you're not getting a snack, you're not checking your phone, you're doing 2 sections back to back, 10-minute break, 2 more sections, and that's the test. Now, finally, I mentioned the laser approach to LSAT prep to help orient your LSAT study schedule. I know there are a lot of general LSAT schedules out there. I've created several of my own over the years, but the thing is, we want to personalize your study plan to your individual situation based on what you've done up to this point, based on your weak areas. And at LSAT Unplugged, by the way, we will create for all of our students personalized day-by-day study plans, laying out exactly what to do from now until test day itself so that you know what to work on and you're not wasting any time. If you'd like to find out more, links below the video. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.